Coaches across the country used the Coachpad this past season to be more efficient with their scout card prep on the weekends as well as when out on the practice field working with their scout teams. Whether you're a coach using a computer program to create cards or drawing them by hand, the Coachpad is for you. Never printing paper or stuffing a binder, clearly seeing scout cards outdoors in the bright sun, and using the coach pad on game days, syncing diagrams from the press box to the sideline were some of the features coaches enjoyed this season. This offseason, get your coach pad at thecoachpad.com to get your program ready for next season. Thecoachpad.com.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have the head football coach at Beekman Charter School in Louisiana, Coach Joseph Purvis. Coach, how you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's been fun. I mean, talking for past 20 minutes, and like I said, we were just getting into story after story, and I was like, we need to kind of just start because good stuff. But how did you end up? I mean, you talked a little bit about off screen, but how did you end up as the head football coach at Beekman Charter?
Well, I started at a different school in the district, Ravel, a school that's been gifted with athletes over the past several decades. They've had a lot of success as a school, so I was fortunate and blessed to become head coach there as my first job. Things just didn't work out quite like I wanted it to. Trying to be a spread guy, being a up tempo spread. Realized that there's a lot of football I had to learn as a football coach. Just because you become a head coach, that means you become the dumbest person on staff, and you need to learn and be the hungriest to get more knowledge. And you also have to learn your kids, and it took me a year to realize what I needed to do as a football coach, and that was adapt a system that I could be successful in as a coach, and my kids could also be successful because I was a better coach in it.
Good. Now, I mean, you mentioned a little bit right there, spread to, and I mean, we've kind of met through the split back Veer group and kind of my desire just to learn more, and just various things I'm looking at for next year and how I want to approach things. And kind of so let's start there. Why did you go to the split back offense in general? Instead of staying spread or going even true like flex bone, because there's a whole different routes you can go. Why the split back Veer over any other system you've chosen to run?
Well, before I got to Ravel, I was a defense coordinator at a 4A school that actually ran the flex bone. I got to personally sit down with Georgia Tech's coaching clinics, with Paul Johnson. That's one of the most he's one of the funniest guys you've ever talked to just because of the way he is. He's just same guy, same thing. When you met with him, he's sitting on a bar stool in the middle of one of his rooms, and you're just sitting out Q&A-ing with him, and his answers are so mind-boggling because they're so simple. I love that. Al Grove taught me how to be an inside linebackers coach. I met Coach Kelly, which he's up at Colorado now. He really worked with us a lot on how to implement the way they ran cover 2 defense. So, I really got a lot of knowledge with them. And I'm currently friends with some people, the ABAX coach at Harding, and they just won their division national championship. So, I know the flex bone fairly well. I'm fairly versed in the Toby Raymond wing T, which I guess you could call us a hybrid wing T flex bone type team. We were way more flex bone than we were wing T, but my old head coach was a wing T guy. My OC was a flex bone guy. So, I had to defend it every day. Every day at practice, I don't care what the scout card said. You was fixing to see Veer, and you coming from somewhere. And, so I had to do that, and that's kind of where I was at. But this is my problem with those offenses. At my first job as a head coach, it was me and one other coach was the only on-staff coaches. Everybody else was volunteer coaches. So the depth of knowledge, and I'm not knocking those guys because they were wonderful. They did everything they possibly could. But this is the thing: when they went home, they went home. If we didn't win a football game, they still had a job. They still could provide for their family. This was a hobby for them. And I don't down them one bit, but it was just different having on staff coaches that this is their profession and what they do. And I just felt like Flexbone is very coaching intensive. The timing of things, the footwork under center, it is very, very intensive in my opinion. So I wanted something that was more downhill, less lateral, but I didn't want to be in the eye because I felt like I had huge tendencies, not knocking it, just it's not what I wanted for the speed. And I wanted kind of God's play being outside veer. And I felt like split back gave me all that. It gave me a better angle for split back or for outside veer, gave me fast hitting plays left and right. You couldn't just key one back or the other. Now, obviously, if you have a stud horse, then that's you're going to ride him a little more. But like the eye, you got one guy in the backfield, and he's your daddy. He's the guy that's going to give you everything. But in split back, I could attack inside, outside veer either side, depending on going one or two tight ends. I could run trap either side with either back. And I didn't have to have a scat back. I could have two fullbacks and be just as successful. Doing different plays. And plus the timing, you had to hold a block. And I was double teamed on point of attack a lot. I wasn't doing a whole lot of reading. We didn't read our inside veer play. We ran what we called a double option. We would call dive, and we wanted to run option. We would read the 5, and it wasn't for dive. It was quarterback pitch. And that was an easy way to get our guys to teach them, to convert from a spread gun to under center. And it worked out really, really well for us. So that's kind of a long version.
No, that was a great answer. I mean, to be honest, that's detailed. And a couple things with that. Would you, and I had this conversation with Storm, would you say your inside and outside veer is really more dive option instead, or a variation of inside outside veer compared to true inside outside veer?
Well, this is the deal. There's two ways of doing it. In the state of Louisiana, you have two trees of split back veer, and both of them is as good as you can get. There's John Curtis, which he's kind of world renowned. He is where he's a triple. He does that, and then you've got Acadiana, which is another 5A school in South Louisiana, and they run split back veer and have for years. Matter of fact, at one point they had the highest points ever scored in the Superdome in the state championship game with it. And they had the guy that they was competing against was a guy that was an LSU commit quarterback, and they put 77 on them. So that right there just shows you that you don't have to quote unquote run the triple to be an effective dive option type team. So what I believe is by doing it the way Acadiana does it, you can hit the dive at a much faster rate. Since it is not a read, you can tighten those backs up, a good half yard or tighter, depending on the back and your quarterback, and you're into the line of scrimmage almost immediately. And that also allows us where our O-line don't have to be great linemen. They can say, oh, well, you ain't got to be a great lineman. We're going to read that guy. Okay. Well, if you ain't got a good guy and that dang 5-tech takes your tackle and gets his hands on him and smashes him down to A-gap, how's that not so good offensive lineman now? This such not having good offensive linemen, you can take that, throw that out of the water. You're going to lose the end. Your O-lineman's either got to be guys that are fast, quick, and nimble, can get it where the first level defender can't get his hands on you, get up to the second level, or you got to have guys that can work the first level and create the mismatches and vertical and horizontal displacement at the first level. Well, with us, we couldn't really do neither one real good. So you know what you have to do? You got to double team.
Yep.
So our motto was, we're going to double team that 3 tech, or we're going to double team C gap. And if that guy whips 2 of my players, then we're going to lose. Because if they're better than 2 of mine, there ain't much more I can do. Yeah, of course we got the option, we got the dive, the cut and trap and counter and sweep. And there's some things you can manipulate. But at the end of the day, if you can't line up and consistently get some yardage on your base dive plays, then you're going to struggle. And that's why we double team and we hit it so fast. And by doing that, it forces that 5 tech to commit at a much faster rate. What you end up getting is so if I'm the defensive end and I want to skate, baby, you ain't gonna get there. We're gonna give it every time, and we're gonna run under you because we're into the line of scrimmage when we hand it off. We're not handing it off in the backfield. But so what it turns out to be is I'm gonna stand up. Is that defensive end, instead of skating like this, it ends up being this, and he turns that shoulder and he's just crashing down. Well, after we've seen that once or twice, well, you know what's coming next. We're fixing to run the dive pitch. We're going to just fake the dive and let him just smoke the dive player and just pitch off that outside backer if you're scraping. And if you're not scraping, well, then we're going to seal your inside backer and my quarterback's fixing to have a good night. That's just kind of how we've done it, and it works well. The option allows you to stretch the field horizontally. All the spread teams, they want to stretch you vertically. Well, I'll agree. You do need to stretch the defense. You need to be able to make them cover the field. Well, I don't have a kid that can throw 100 yards, but I got guys that can run option wide or sweep. So I'll make you defend 53 yards total field width. A lot easier than me trying to throw it down the field because I probably ain't got nobody that can outrun your secondary anyway.
Now, my next question for you, because I know, because as I've gone down this rabbit hole, I've talked to Storm, I've watched Acadia, I've watched John Curtis, and I mean, obviously, when you watch Acadia and John Curtis, it's the same formations, but I mean, it is 2 different styles of, again, as you kind of pointed out, how to run the option. It's very apparent, and even your auxiliary plays, like the stuff you run with it is drastically different. I mean, I watched Acadia throw like 5 different trick plays out in one of their playoff games. Like it's just, whereas John Curtis is just running option, and maybe like cutback. But like my curiosity is, and I've noticed as I've talked to Storm and I've watched this too, there's small little differences in how they line up their split backs. And I'm just kind of curious kind of how you do it. I've seen them as tight as pretty much they're on the inside shoulder of the guards. I've seen them head up on the guards. I've seen them as deep as heels at 5. I've seen them as tight as heels as 3. Where do you kind of go with how you line up your backs, and how much does it really change?
Well, first of all, it does change slightly. But as you get with better teams and teams start getting end zone copies of you after they've done played you a couple times, plus they've got good sideline copies, you start tipping things off when you go to adjusting very much. So we try to not adjust drastically. We don't want one back to be way up and the other one way back when we're running certain plays. Like if we're running dive option to the right, we don't want our right back to be scooted up a yard and our left back, which will go in pitch phase, be back a yard. We're going to do that, might as well run the I. So, but what we do try to do is we try to keep them heels no deeper than 5. That's absolute depth. Typically we really run more like toes at 4. So, we want tight because, our deal is, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee type deal. We know we're not going to have these big bruising backs and these big, massive bruising O linemen where we can just go toe to toe for you and take punch and after punch. We've got to be quicker and faster to the point of attack, because even though I'm double teaming up front, I can't guarantee you I'm going to hold that guy, for 6 seconds. It might be a 3.5 second block, and we've got to veer out and get to the next level and let our backs be backs. But as far as our splits with our running backs, I typically try to keep your inside foot 2 feet from your center's foot. The reason I do that is because my O-linemen, we adjust a lot up front. I try to be as wide as I possibly can be, and that's based on my offensive lineman's athletic ability. The more athletic we are, the wider I get. When I was at Rayville, we at times would be 3.5 feet, mainly because I had really athletic offensive linemen. I would never go wider than that, but a lot of times if you would look up, you'd have every other gap, I'd be 3 foot wide, and then every other gap, I'd be a foot wide. A quick rule is if you got somebody in your gap, tighten it down. If you don't, open it up. And so my running backs can't just line up on the guards.
Yeah.
The center, he's always the same. So he's a good static alignment. So I can say, hey, if I'm the right back, my left foot needs to be 2 feet wider than his foot, the center's foot. And that way it helps your mesh points with your backs consistently and allows your O-lineman to adjust splits constantly. And then as far as depth goes, like I said, no deeper than 5, but typically we're toes at 4. We will adjust slightly within that range, depending on certain plays. Some plays it's just better to be a little deeper.
Yeah.
And if you've got a back that's just got phenomenal hips and comes out of his stance really well, he may not be able to do his toes at 4 because he'll beat the quarterback there. You may have to put him at 5 to allow that mesh point to happen correctly. But that's kind of a play and see type deal.
Yeah. That's a whole different atmosphere. But even to that point, even if you give away a little, I don't think it truly matters as much as people think it does. If you watch Air Force, and I've had this conversation with a couple people, you watch Air Force's TV copy, you can call out half to, if not more, of their offense because they're lining up, their wings are adjusting, and it's down to 2 plays. They're giving away, they don't care. They're going to put their kids in the best position to go. And even if your players on the field recognize it, you have 2 seconds to make the adjustment, if that. By the time you're not even going to be fully in place to make the adjustment you need half the time.
Well, what we've saw is, I'm going to be honest with you, teams that we've only played one time, or head coaches or defensive coordinators I've only played once or twice, then I don't care, because I know they're not going to pick up on it fast enough. Where you'll get in trouble with is this coming year, we're going to play Storm's team that he's the OC for. So I know that when we play them, well, they know everything we do. Well, I know everything they do. So when I'm watching film, what do you think we're coaching our kids to do? We're making those quick adjustments on field because we have knowledge of the other opponent so well. Well, those are the type of teams that will give you problems when you start adjusting like that, is teams that are either equal to you or slightly better than you, but their coaching staff is so familiar with you and your system that it doesn't take them but a second. They already know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But if it's some average team that has not seen split back or really much option at all, which hardly anybody does, and they've got basically 3 days and then a pregame to get it all in, I'm not worried about none of that.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true with your state, with how much split back and that is still in your state, if we're being honest, though. Your state is still you look at the state playoffs and championships, and you guys are notorious for that. But I had the same conversation with their coach earlier today. You go to Kansas and they're flex bone heaven. It's every state's kind of got their little niche of what they still kind of do. Now the other part with it is like I know your O-line splits vary, and that's typical with any option team, whether you're flex bone, split back V, or wishbone, you're going to mess around with that stuff. My other question with your alignment stuff is, are you more O-line off the ball as much as possible, or are you having them hug as much as possible? Like I know there's differing opinions on that. Where do you kind of fall in that world?
There's actually different opinions of that on my staff. My coordinator, like, they need to be crowding the ball. You need. I said, why? I said, so a superior man can grab a hold to one of my boys up front and sling him. I said, we're going to recess to the absolute max. And I guess that's because all the wing T and option stuff. I mean, there's a lot of times you'll look up and you can't even see the quarterback because he's in between the hips of my guards. You know, especially a quarterback that sinks his hips down and gets up underneath the center a lot. You know, you literally cannot hardly see him because of the two guards' hips are basically covering him. I want my O-line, their helmets to be a straight line. This isn't the Mighty Ducks. We don't do a flying V. And I want their helmets on the hip pad and the crown of their helmet to barely break the waistband of my center. And if I got a tall center, it makes it even better.
That's so there. I've at least noticed the first major difference between you and Storm.
Storm is a spread guy, which is power counter. Well, guess what power counter does? You want to be up there. I don't. I want to put a big fat D lineman in space and make him try to get upfield to get his hands on me, or be super, super disciplined, and his first step has to be to an imaginary line flat, basically, because that's where my lineman's going. But it also, believe it or not, I mean, you know, for us, you know, this is kind of funny. My O-line, when I got to Beekman, I bought their first sled that they ever had. 5-man left sled, baby. They thought they was walking in high cotton, and dang it, I had to have all 5 linemen to push it. I couldn't, like, my linemen, like, I couldn't take 2 or 3 guys and spin my sled. That's how weak we were. And so I noticed, but they were quick. So my deal was if we got distance and, you know, big time preaching, the lineman that gets his second to third step in first wins. So our deal was I went old school. You know, this is the first time I've ever done this was at Beekman. Prior, I'll use hands. But at Beekman, baby, I broke out the old wing T terminology of old flipper, and I shoulder pad to thigh. You know, was our thought process, and how fast can we get our second and third step in through his thigh and get that lineman moving. And what I found is D lineman does not like that. They don't like it at all. And then let me tell you something. We cut a lot. I mean, if you're backside, you getting cut. I mean, and if we're running sweep and you're a down lineman, everybody but that backside 5 is getting cut. And if my O lineman don't cut them, I don't care if they pancake them. It's something about cutting a D lineman. It's a mind thing. We do punishment work on Mondays if you don't cut. You know, and I want people to get their bodies down. I want D linemen how to get up after they just got cut.
Now with that, would you say your O-line technique is more wing T-ish or flex bone-ish? Like based off that, like, I mean, you've obviously you've kind of lived in both worlds, and
wing T.
Okay.
Old school Toby Raymond.
Because I mean, you kind of see the variations of it, and like obviously there's a lot of similarities between the flex bone and wing T blocking. It's a lot lower angles. I would say the flex bone people have their ass up a little bit more, and it's almost like bear crawling, whereas wing T is more, as you kind of mentioned, flipper, related, but still very low.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do two type of thought processes. We have a narrow split, like our feet are under our armpits. We don't have this big fat wide deal. And like I tell my guys, are like, we are sprinters, we are athletes. We have to be fast as wide receivers and as strong as anybody else on the field. Now, obviously, a lot of this is Jedi mind trick. You got to drink the Kool-Aid up front. I know my lineman ain't fast as my receivers. Lord, I hope not. But the thing is that you have to sell that to them. And when they're coming off the ball, their first 4 or 5 steps have got to be like you're running a 50-yard dash or a 60-yard dash in a indoor track meet. I mean, that's the mindset. So I make them. I do. I got it from Harding. Pigeon toe, feet underneath your armpits, and your butt kind of up a little bit, not huge, but when you come off, you creating that big surface level of that shoulder out to that flipper and drive through the thigh of the O-line, the D lineman. So I guess when you're saying it like the nuances like that, yeah, I am more flex bone with the drive concept, but with the surface area of the flipper. And because I want because cutting, if you teach blocking through that shoulder of that flipper, when you cut somebody, that makes it even easier. Because you don't cut somebody shooting your hands, you cut through with that shoulder pad. And it really created a nasty mindset with the O lineman. And if you can do that, man, and make them O linemen love creating misery and pain for people, you can win some football games and not be very good any other place. Because them D linemen, they just don't like it. And that's a beautiful thought when the defense is over there looking at you and there's nothing that they can really do. It's different when you can outrun somebody, but when you're standing toe to toe to them and they know where you're at and you're not running away from them, you're running through them. It's a little demoralizing at times.
Well, to your point, like I was talking to David Duty, which will be on an earlier episode, and he's coached in the flex bone and the slot T, and he talked about like when he worked for Bruce, I can't remember his last name, who found the slot T, and he talked about like back then they could cut anywhere, like it was like free range, and he's like his kids were like lawnmowers, like they were just clipping people left and right, and that's that's why the NCAA alters rules and does what they do to affect triple teams. But like, when like Navy and Army were humming and like Paul Johnson was at Navy, they were just clipping people left and right. And it's a beautiful thing. But speaking of run game, like everybody I think has a little bit different nuances to their split back veer. Like, and what's their obviously inside outside veers there, whether you run it more as dive or as true veer, whatever. But everybody else, like I know, like talking to Storm, they're a lot more like belly belly or down. But I was watching again Acadia earlier, and they were running a lot of toss and rocket sweep. As I said earlier, John Curtis, it runs a lot of cutback, looks like to me. Again, I've watched snippets. Okay. What is kind of your like base run game that you kind of install? What are your 5 to 6 that you kind of focus on?
Well, obviously inside outside veer, that is the bread and butter. That's our jab plays that sets up everything else. The next play that we really, really start working hard on is sweep. We run sweep, myriad of different ways. We'll run it where the quarterback reverses out and just follows in behind them. It's a Q sweep. We'll run it to where we call it kind of a rocket mindset. We call it scat. We really like to try to formation people that and do a quick pitch, but in a flex ball mindset, it's basically rocket toss. And because it's all about out leveraging that in man, and you're not blocking nobody up front. It's literally everybody's. I mean, we'll cut people just to cut them on that backside because they pass that level on rocket toss. But the play side, man, I mean, we worry about we'll crack that 5, and then we'll get outside of them. We'll pull guard and tackle because our mindset is a 3-tech ain't gonna make that play anyway. You know, if he does, then we've greatly. Yeah, we got some other problems. So you know, those are kind of our mains. You know, outside of the dive, Veer, it's sweep, and then after that we trap. Man, we trap a lot. And it's real funny because trap a lot of times, especially early in the game, will not be very successful because everybody knows we're going to run trap, and they just start just clamping down with those 3s for the trap. The 5s are squeezing so hard and just crashing in beasts. You know, well, okay, that's great. That means we're going to get outside of you, and sweep and toss are cheap. You know, there's little downside to it. And it really allows us to make you stay honest on the outside. You know, if you're going to run man with us and you're going to put that single corner, possibly your worst tackler, one-on-one with our receiver, plus lineman pulling out there, you know, if we can seal you inside because you're worried about dive or trap, then that allows us a huge opportunity. And as soon as your defensive ends are trying to widen to stop sweep, well, now you just give us back our dive play, what we want. And really, man, that's it. You know, that's probably 75% of our offense right there. Them 4 plays, really. Sweep, you know, sweep, toss, same mindset, trap, inside, outside, Veer. That's pretty much what we got.
Now, how do you run your trap? Like, because obviously when you think trap, let's just be honest, you think of directly behind the quarterback. You think down the midline. I mean, quarterback opens usually opposite, and you follow you fall straight down the line, you cut behind the guard, and you get vertical, and everybody's walled off. So obviously it's a little different because your guys are a little offset. So how do you run trap?
Well, we actually run it 2 different ways. We run it where it looks like the option. That way you're getting full flow with option, and you basically trap back door. You know, it really, really works versus an underfront a lot. You know, that way you can kind of be tight end heavy, run and dive, and you trap backside to that 3. So what our play side, are the back that's getting the ball, what he'll end up doing, instead of taking a vertical step down or an outward step, he'll take more of his aiming point will be the inside hip of the guard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a slight inside angle, and he takes the mesh, and it really turns into a cutback. You know, John Kerr's how they run their cutback play. You know, and instead of us folding backside, like block out and fold, and that cutback hits up in there, you know, we don't. We trap the 3, and our guard tackle gets up to backers. And it really, really works well. What we have found is teams that run like a true 4-2-5 is when they start blitzing that backside A gap a lot. You know, sometimes they'll beat my guard across. So whenever they start doing that type of stuff, we have another variation that our backfield looks more like toss. So it ends up being a counter trap is what it ends up being. The quarterback reverses out and does a complete reverse out and hands off underneath. And our back will take just not even a jab step. It's almost more like an outside veer step, and then allows the guard to pull, and he gets back in there, and it allows the quarterback to turn back around, and he just hands it back off underneath. So we're going to get them backers flowing one way or the other. So because it's only a matter of time your 3 is going to start getting upfield, because one is going to get tired, and he's a high school kid. And then the biggest is just getting them linebackers flowing. If we can do that, we got great angles, and typically we'll be in your 3rd level pretty quick.
Okay. I've heard, Coach. Now with that first trap, is that to the tight end, or say you have one tight end? Is it typically to the tight end on that, or is it going
It's
backside?
it's going to be the open A gap.
Okay.
We run trap open A. We trap first thing head up to outside of the guard.
Okay.
We don't gap defender. We it can be done. It's just typically more than what my guys can do, if that makes sense. It's super.
Let me word that a little better. When we're, because I'm visual, so when we have these conversations, I gotta try to mentally process these. So say you're running your I don't know, like your trap back's on your right. Is he hitting trap to the right, or is he usually going across? Like, so when you say he's aiming to the inside foot of the guard, are you talking front side guard or back side guard?
So the deal is what we're going to do is what we are going to do is going to. So the guy who's going to get the ball is actually going to be. So if we're running trap back to the left, our right back is going to get the ball.
Okay.
And he's trapping back to the left. Okay. So I mean, it is the backfield motion looks very, very similar to your first like Curtis's cut play.
Okay.
It's very, very similar. So you're going to get backside. It's basically because all the plays I've told you, like sweep, inside, outside, veer, those are full flow plays, right? Yep. Everything opens up. Everything's to the play side. Well, what you end up doing is you start getting them linebackers running, just screaming out of there. So what you have to do is you've got to have a play that hurts them, that makes them stay inside the box, because those inside backers flowing hard and fast outside is what's going to stop, get the extra guy on the perimeter when you're trying to run option and sweep. Well, if they're having to stay hard inside because they're having to worry about trap popping, then that allows you to be able to seal them and create a good lane.
Okay. And so you almost treat it almost like a counter play at that point.
It is. Trap for us is a short counter.
Okay. Okay.
That's why, I mean, we run the old GT counter. We do run it some, but we only run it probably 2 to 4 times a game, because we rely on traps so much.
Okay. Now the other thing, one of the last things I want to ask you is you mentioned when we were messaging back and forth that you've run a little bit out of the gun, and I'm just curious the differences in that. Obviously, I mean, just a general like concept perspective, like looking at it, it's pretty easy. You just drop the quarterback back. You still got a 2-back offense in the backfield. If you have a mobile quarterback, allows you to probably do a little bit more, or if you have some skill kids, you can throw out of it and still have. I mean, you really don't got to change anything. So, like, what I mean, you said you've played with it. So, what does that kind of look like, and kind of why?
Well, let me tell you, this is the biggest reason why I'm sorry I had to move over. My phone was dying. I had to plug it up. So sometimes, Coach, what we found is some quarterbacks, I mean, they may be one of your better athletes, but they're just not real comfortable under center. They're just not comfortable. But they're a cat that he needs the ball in his hand at all times. If you put him out receiver, I feel like you're doing him disjustice. If you put him at running back, yeah, he'll get the ball more, but not as big of an effective maker. Because look, Storm had a kid that he run a freaking quarterback GT out of. That cat was a stud. I mean, I love that play. I wish I could have run it, but I don't have a quarterback that can do what that kid could do. And he was under center. So what we had to do is we, to allow, believe it or not, the Q game more we get in the gun. And by allowing that, allows our quarterback to be more of a downhill runner for us. We also, when we get in the gun, we read dive, quarterback, keep. When we run dive under center, it's dive. When we run dive in the gun, we actually read the 5. So it ends up becoming a wide midline, basically.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I was just curious, like how that would alter some things. Like obviously, from a common sense standpoint, I can kind of do some math in my head. But I mean, yeah, if you got an athlete that can run, I mean, you use them to your heart's content. And we ran power read at the end of last year just because my quarterback had some wheels, and we let him go, and our week 10 opponent just let us just let him keep the ball over and over again. He's like, fine, he's going to get first downs. I mean, he can move. So, one last things I want to ask you is, you've kind of mentioned it. I don't remember if we did on or off screen. There's not a lot of resources. Like, let's just be honest. Like, Billy. I think I've probably mentioned this on a couple other podcasts that will have popped up by now. Like, the Wishbone had at least like 1 or 2 filmed clinics. The UCLA coach who stole it from Emory Ballard, they went and talked to him, ended up writing a book after 1 year, and just putting it out there. But like, you look at Bill Yeoman, who founded the offense. There's no, he's got like this little playbook that's online that you can kind of find. But outside of that, he did no clinics. A lot of his followers didn't do much, like, especially in an age where everybody shared everything, like, because they wanted, you didn't make a lot, so you're trying to make some extra money. There's not like really a bunch of books. So like, kind of like, where do you, obviously the Split Back Veer Facebook group is a big resource. Where else do you kind of look or try to steal stuff or talk to guys to kind of continue to develop this offense?
Well, the big deal is, like you said earlier, with Louisiana being a split back Veer state, they run the crap out of it. There's about 6 schools that I know of right off the top of my head that's had some success with it. And plus some old stuff from De La Salle out of California, running the whole streak, the 152 win games. But the team that beat them, Bellevue, was a wing T team. So I've got a lot of that film. I had a really, really good friend of mine that coached that, Coach Wilson, and he gave me a lot of what he had accumulated over the years, and he also had put a lot of it, like he had scanned it in and made e-copies of a lot of it. So, I've released some of that stuff on my split back page, because there is so little. And one of the reasons why a lot of people this isn't really a flashy offense. It can really be, something really explosive. It can be everything you want it to be. And you can do a lot, you can manipulate it a good bit. But, like flex bone, there's a lot of moving parts. Wing T's getting kind of a big resurgence, popularity because, first with like Gus Malzahn and, being a big wing T guy, doing it in the gun. And, so all those offenses are great, but they're flashy. They got a lot of pizzazz to them, a lot of moving parts. And believe it or not, coaches, if they're not doing a whole lot, they believe they're not good coaches. And sometimes don't do a whole lot, get really, really good at what you do, and make the other team beat you. There is no golden bullet. If there was, man, there'd be so many people doing the same thing. There would be only one offense. But the problem is there isn't. Split back is a true vanilla offense, but it's also can be manipulated in so many different ways. That's what's great about it. We haven't even talked about running power counter out of it. It's an easy adaptation to run power counter. Just like Storm, he runs G a lot and down. You know, so I mean, you can really make it your own. This past year, we ended up running with our sweep, you know, because I like G, to be honest with you. You know, or down is what you called it. I like down a lot. I think it's a great play. It because it reminds me a lot of kind of an outside veer, but with a play side pull kick. Uh, but you know, we made it to where now teams started giving us two off the edge to stop our sweeps. You know, they give us either a tight six or a real good seven, and then they give us a loose nine. And as soon as the ball snapped, that six or seven would just crash hard for dive, and that nine would shoot straight up field and just immediately stop sweep, take the pitch man, really caused us some issues. Well, whenever we go to doing that, our adjustment, we just call GGGG and just creates the down play basically. You know, that way that crashing six or seven, well, my tight end can just wash him, you know, and because he's taking himself down out of the play anyway. Well, you just wash him. Well, that guy's shooting upfield. We'll kick him if we have to. There's been times where we haven't even really had to kick him because he gets so far upfield. You know, and then we just lead up into the hole with the play side guy, and then the back cuts it up underneath that. And that's really, really done well for us. We had a team that they were running 3-3, and they were super aggressive with them backers doing that, and they were going to take sweep away, hell or high water. But they struggled with G pretty bad. So we were fortunate with that.
Perfect, Coach. Like I said, I think we could talk for the next 12 hours at this rate. I mean, I like it could down rabbit holes, but I'll cut it there. Like coaches, if you need to get a hold of Coach, go to Facebook, find the Split Back Veer group, and you can kind of reach out to him fairly easy that way. I mean, he was very receptive and got a hold of me after he got done taking care of his deer hunting tonight. Enjoying his life there. But like I said, make sure you check out that. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Check out Coachpad. But like I said, if you got any more questions on Split Back Veer, check out Coach and reach out to him. Like I said, they do a lot. I mean, or you can just pull up film. There's plenty of YouTube Split Back Veer Louisiana high school games I've discovered on YouTube. So that's a great way to kind of find if you want to kind of dive down some rabbit holes. Otherwise, that's another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.